4 goals. 4 clean, ruthless, unanswerable goals. That's what Japan just did to Tunisia at the 2026 World Cup, and not a single one of them was lucky. Kamada finished inside 4 minutes. Ueda bent one into the far corner from 18 yards like he was practicing alone. Ito rolled a third past the goalkeeper with the calmness of someone who's done this 1,000 times before. And then Ueda again, a looping header that 2 defenders on the line couldn't stop. 4-0. The first time an Asian team has ever scored 4 goals in a single World Cup match. The largest margin of victory by any Asian nation in World Cup history. And the reaction from most of the football world was the same. Wait, when did Japan become this? That's the question. Because this isn't the Japan that people remember from World Cups past. This isn't the team that used to show up, play with heart, and go home in the group stage. This team just drew with the Netherlands, then dismantled Tunisia without breaking a sweat. They're sitting second in their group with a genuine path to the knockout rounds, and nobody in that bracket wants to face them. But here's what makes this story different from a team simply having a good tournament. Japan didn't stumble into this, they built it. Deliberately, patiently, over 3 decades. And the blueprint they followed might be the most impressive long-term project in the history of international football. Because 30 years ago, Japan didn't have a professional football league, not a weak one, not a developing one. They literally didn't have one. Baseball dominated everything. Sumo wrestling carried the tradition. Football was an afterthought, played mostly by corporate workers in company leagues that nobody watched. The national team had never qualified for a World Cup. They'd never beaten a serious opponent. They weren't on the map. If you told someone in 1993 that Japan would one day put 4 goals past an African nation at a World Cup and have the footballing world call them dark horses to win the whole thing, they would have looked at you like you were out of your mind. But that's exactly what happened. And the story of how it happened starts with the most painful night in Japanese sports history. October 28, 1993. Doha, Qatar. Japan is 90 minutes away from qualifying for their first ever World Cup. They're playing Iraq, and they're winning 2-1. The stadium is electric. Back in Japan, millions are watching on television. The dream is right there. Then Iraq equalize in stoppage time, 2-2. And just like that, Japan is eliminated. They miss the 1994 World Cup by a single goal. The players collapse on the pitch in tears. An entire country goes silent. They call it the Tragedy of Doha, and it still haunts Japanese football to this day. But that heartbreak did something nobody expected. It woke Japan up. The country looked at itself and realized that if it was serious about football, it couldn't keep running the sport like a hobby. Everything had to change. The infrastructure, the coaching, the youth development, the entire mentality around the game. And Japan, being Japan, didn't just talk about it. They executed. The J-League had already launched earlier that same year, in 1993, becoming Japan's first fully professional football league. It wasn't some minor local competition either. They brought in global stars to raise the standard. Zico came from Brazil, Gary Lineker came from England, Dragan Stojkovic came from Yugoslavia. The message was clear. Japan was going to learn from the best, and it was going to learn fast. The league did exactly what it was designed to do. It gave young Japanese players a professional environment to develop. It built community-based clubs with proper youth academies instead of relying on company teams. And it created a football culture in a country where one had never existed before. 5 years after the devastation of Doha, Japan qualified for the 1998 World Cup in France. Their first ever. The group was brutal. Argentina, Croatia, Jamaica. Japan lost all 3 matches and finished at the bottom. But nobody cared. Just being there felt like a breakthrough for a country that couldn't even qualify 5 years earlier. And then something happened in that tournament that changed the trajectory of Japanese football forever. A 21-year-old midfielder named Hidetoshi Nakata stepped onto the World Cup stage and looked like he belonged there. Dyed hair, unshakable confidence, vision that could unlock any defense. Nakata became the first true global icon of Japanese football. He moved to Serie A shortly after and proved that a Japanese player could not only survive in Europe, he could thrive. The door was open, and Japan was about to kick it off its hinges. The 2002 World Cup changed everything. Japan co-hosted the tournament with South Korea, and for the first time, the entire country had football at the center of its identity. This wasn't just a sporting event, it was a cultural moment. Streets were packed, stadiums were sold out. Kids who'd never kicked a ball before were suddenly dreaming about wearing the blue shirt. Under French manager Philippe Troussier, Japan played with a discipline and aggression the world had never seen from them. The opening match was a dramatic 2-2 draw against Belgium. Then came June 9, 2002, in Yokohama. Japan versus Russia. Junichi Inamoto scored the winning goal, and Japan recorded its first ever World Cup victory. The stadium erupted. An entire nation exhaled. They followed that up by beating Tunisia 2-0 to finish top of their group and qualify for the knockout rounds for the first time in history. Football in Japan exploded after that moment. The national team went from a curiosity to a source of genuine pride. An entire generation of young players who grew up watching that tournament would later become the foundation of everything Japan is building today. The dream ended with a 1-0 loss to Turkey in the round of 16, but by that point, the result was almost secondary. The 2002 World Cup gave Japanese football something it had never had before: belief. So when the 2006 World Cup arrived in Germany, expectations were sky high. Japan had what many considered its strongest squad ever assembled. Nakata was still there. Shunsuke Nakamura was bending free kicks for Celtic. Shinji Ono was creating chances in the Eredivisie. On paper, this looked like the golden generation. To lead them, Japan hired Brazilian legend Zico. He wanted creativity, freedom, and flair. It sounded perfect for the talent in that squad. Then the tournament started, and everything fell apart. Against Australia, Japan led 1-0 heading into the final minutes. Then Australia scored 3 times after the 84th minute. 3 goals in 6 minutes. A comfortable win turned into a devastating 3-1 collapse. Japan never recovered. A goalless draw against Croatia followed. Then Brazil destroyed them 4-1 to end the tournament in embarrassment. Shortly after Japan's elimination, Nakata announced his retirement at just 29 years old. The face of modern Japanese football walked away from the game at the exact moment his country needed him most. One generation was over, and the next one hadn't arrived yet. After the disaster in Germany, nobody knew what to expect from Japan at the 2010 World Cup in South Africa. Expectations were low. The golden generation was gone. The confidence had been shattered. Most people figured Japan would show up, compete respectfully, and go home quietly. Instead, this became the tournament where Keisuke Honda announced himself to the world. They called him the Emperor. Not because anyone gave him the nickname, because he carried himself like one. Honda played with a swagger and a belief that felt almost reckless for a Japanese player at that time. But it wasn't arrogance, it was conviction, and it was exactly what this team needed. In the opening match against Cameroon, Honda scored the only goal. Japan won 1-0, and suddenly, the energy around the squad shifted completely. Then came the final group match against Denmark, and Japan produced one of the greatest set-piece performances in World Cup history. Honda stepped up and smashed a swerving free kick from distance that left the goalkeeper frozen to the spot. Minutes later, Yasuhito Endo curled in another. Japan won 3-1 and advanced to the knockout rounds with authority. The round of 16 against Paraguay became a tense, exhausting war. Neither side could score through 90 minutes or extra time. It went to penalties. And that's where the heartbreak came. Japan lost 5-3 in the shootout. The players were devastated. But the 2010 squad had changed something fundamental about how the world viewed Japanese football. For the first time, Japan genuinely looked like a team that could go to a World Cup away from home and beat quality opponents under real pressure. Then came Brazil 2014, and it all went backwards. Japan arrived with their most talented squad to date. Players were now at AC Milan, Manchester United, and Inter. Shinji Kagawa was one of the highest-rated attacking midfielders in Europe. The belief was that Japan had reached a new level. They hadn't. A 2-1 loss to Ivory Coast after leading, a goalless draw against 10-man Greece, and then Colombia exposed every weakness in a humiliating 4-1 destruction. Japan went home without a single point. The lesson was painful, but clear. Having technically gifted individuals at big European clubs wasn't enough. Japan needed more intensity, more physicality, and above all, they needed a system that turned talented individuals into a ruthless collective. That realization would become the foundation of everything that followed. Russia 2018 is the World Cup that still keeps Japanese fans awake at night. Because this wasn't a tournament where Japan was simply eliminated. This was a tournament where Japan was 14 seconds away from making history and watched it disappear in real time. It started brilliantly. Japan beat Colombia 2-1 in the opening match, becoming the first Asian nation to ever defeat a South American team at a World Cup. The confidence was real. The momentum was building. And then came Belgium in the round of 16. Belgium's squad was stacked. Hazard, De Bruyne, Lukaku. One of the most talented generations in European football. Nobody gave Japan a chance. And for 69 minutes, nobody needed to. Then Genki Haraguchi scored, and 3 minutes later, Takashi Inui made it 2-0. Japan was leading Belgium by 2 goals in a World Cup knockout match. The upset of the century was happening. Belgium pulled one back, then equalized. 2-2. Extra time was moments away. Japan won a corner kick. All they had to do was slow the game down, waste a few seconds, and regroup. Instead, they pushed forward. Belgium's goalkeeper Thibaut Courtois caught the ball, launched a counterattack, and 14 seconds later, Nasser Chadli scored at the other end. 3-2. Belgium. Final whistle. The speed of that collapse was brutal. That counterattack became so famous in Japan that documentaries were made analyzing every single second of it. The pain of that night was different from any World Cup exit before, because for the first time, Japan hadn't just competed with the elite, they'd been beating the elite, and they let it slip. 4 years later, Japan turned that pain into something extraordinary. At the 2022 World Cup in Qatar, Japan was drawn into a group with Germany and Spain, two former world champions. Most analysts predicted Japan would finish third or fourth. Instead, Hajime Moriyasu did something no one saw coming. Against Germany, Japan went behind 1-0. Moriyasu made substitutions at halftime that completely changed the shape of the game. Ritsu Doan equalized. Takuma Asano scored the winner. Japan 2, Germany 1. The footballing world lost its mind. Then they did it again. Against Spain. Fell behind 1-0. Same response. Doan scored again. Ao Tanaka added another. Japan 2, Spain 1. Top of the group. Ahead of both European giants. The familiar heartbreak returned in the round of 16. Penalties against Croatia. Japan lost again from the spot, but something had fundamentally shifted. Japan was no longer an underdog trying to survive. They were a team the entire world had to take seriously. So what changed? Why does this Japan squad feel like something entirely new? The answer isn't one player or one manager or one lucky tournament. The answer is the system. Over the last decade, Japan quietly built a pipeline into European football that no other Asian country has come close to replicating. When the J-League launched in 1993, the goal was to develop players domestically. That worked, but the next step was sending those players abroad to sharpen themselves against the best competition on the planet. And Japan didn't do this casually. They did it at scale. As of this season, there are over 100 Japanese players competing across European leagues. That number's increased 90% in just 5 years. They're not sitting on benches either. Wataru Endo captains Liverpool. Daichi Kamada starts for Crystal Palace. Hiroki Ito plays for Bayern Munich. Takefusa Kubo is one of the most creative attackers in La Liga at Real Sociedad. Ao Tanaka anchors the midfield at Leeds United. Kaishu Sano is valued at 40 million euros at Mainz. These aren't token signings. These are players embedded in the starting 11s of elite European clubs, tested every single week against world-class opposition. The acquisition of Sint-Truiden in Belgium by a Japanese company in 2017 became a turning point. That club became a launchpad. Players like Tomiyasu and Endo proved themselves there and stepped up to the Premier League. Once European scouts saw that Japanese players could handle the intensity, the physicality, and the pressure of top-level football, the floodgates opened. Now clubs from the Bundesliga, the Eredivisie, and the Premier League actively scout the J-League looking for the next one. And then there's Ayase Ueda. For years, the one criticism of Japan was that they could never produce an elite striker. They created chances, but couldn't finish them. Ueda's ended that conversation. 25 goals in 31 Eredivisie appearances for Feyenoord last season. Top scorer in the league, 2 goals against Tunisia at the World Cup. He plays like a classic number 9. He attacks crosses, fights center backs physically, and finishes with the composure of someone who's done it 1,000 times. This isn't the same Japan. This isn't the team that lost all 3 matches in 1998. This isn't the team that collapsed against Australia in 2006. This isn't even the team that let Belgium counterattack them into oblivion in 2018. This is a team that was built deliberately over 30 years, from the ashes of Doha to the wreckage of Tunisia. And they're not finished yet.